And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Giovanni. And come on, Giovanni, let's come and join us. Giovanni.
Hello, everyone.
I feel as if I know you really well, Giovanni, because I've read your stuff, I've seen your films. Our colleagues at National Geographic Italia, we share those colleagues and we share their information. And I think, if I'm lucky, I'm going to be with you in July for some diving. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. We will meet in July in the Mediterranean Sea.
How great is that? Just like everybody joining us, we haven't been doing much travel lately. And, it's really been quite the change in life for everybody. But very fortunately, my first escape trip is a National Geographic production with Giovanni. So I'm really looking forward to this. And Giovanni, I can't wait to join you in the Med. Your work is exciting. It's vital stuff. And I'm going to be with you in the sea. I'm already feeling a little bit wet, salty, and a bit windblown.
Be ready to scuba dive. I'm going to show you some of the stuff I'll show you when we will see. So I can share the screen, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, I will share my screen.
Great.
Please confirm if you see my presentation.
Got it.
Okay, perfect. So in this great journey, which is the Global Biodiversity Festival, I'm going to take you now in this little basin compared to the great oceans, which is the Mediterranean Sea. A small basin that, however, talking about biodiversity, is a hotspot of biodiversity. It's full of different forms of life. And here in this basin, we have also corals. And when we talk about corals, we always think about tropical coral reefs. Of course, they're huge and they're beautiful. But also at temperate places, we've got corals. In particular, corals are important habitat formers, as you probably know. They are the equivalent of trees on land, so they create a place where a lot of animals can live. And we've got stony corals that are very hard and form coral reef, but we've got also coral forest made by other species of corals, which are much more soft, like black corals or gorgonians. So these guys are animals as well, and they are quite soft or elastic, so they can create this structure like forest, like coral forest. These are tropical places, but also, as I was saying, in temperate ecosystems, we've got different species of corals. These are some of them. We have stony corals, we have black corals, we have many yellow corals, and so on. The point is that all these guys in the Mediterranean Sea, they live in deep waters. Some of them start at 50, 60 meter depth and go down up to almost 1,500 meter depth. So they are pretty much deep. And in fact, until 20 years ago, they were thought to be almost extinct in the Mediterranean Sea. These are cold water corals. So it was common opinion among scientists to think that the few corals known thus far in 20 years ago were almost relict from a much more lush development of these corals during the last glacial. And so now the Mediterranean is too warm and these corals cannot thrive anymore. Then something very important happened. During August 2000, a group of Italian fishermen did a very wrong fishing troll survey, and they collected by accident a lot of living deep sea corals. And so this specific moment was the turning point for the study of deep sea corals in the Med, because scientists finally realized that somewhere there were still huge lush populations of these corals. And so the exploration began again, much stronger, much more powerful. And what we've got from 2000 to now, we have pretty much an exponential finding of deep sea coral sites in the basin. And so this triggered by the fact that now we knew that these corals were there somewhere. And what's the situation now? Now the Mediterranean Sea appears pretty much speckled of many different deep sea coral sites. And this map is already 2 years old, and I can tell you there are much more places with deep sea corals, and I can promise there will be much more in the future, because we are now starting to have a clear idea, adding tile by tile to this still incomplete mosaic of distribution of these corals, and we are also realizing how these corals are all connected one to the other. So, well, this is a great moment for deep sea exploration. On the right, there's a comic from an Italian artist that I love in particular, because here and now is not something deep only from a philosophical point of view, but this is really the golden age for deep sea exploration. Here and now is the best moment for deep sea scientists, because of course we have technologies, we have remotely operated vehicles, we have submersibles, and so we have the chance to see, to explore the deep sea bed, and we are so realizing how this remote place is not just a blue desert, but it's full of life, it's full of biodiversity. If we read the diaries of some of the great early explorers of this basin, from Jacques Cousteau to the French Perret Picard, we can see that they regret not having the possibility to see the life they were studying much deeper, for example, at 200, 300, 500 meter depth. They didn't have the technology to do it, and now we are lucky enough to have it. So this is really the golden age to study deep sea biodiversity. And this is true also in the Mediterranean Sea, a place which is pretty much well known in coastal areas, but still in the deep part, as all over the world, is pretty much unexplored. And what we see weird stuff. Talking about biodiversity, this is just an example. This fish is called Bentocometes robustus, the casque eel. Well, this fish is known since more or less 200 or 300 years, but known because it was collected by fishermen. And this guy in particular was described by ichthyologists as a weird fish because it has a small, tiny tail and a huge, heavy head. So they were not really understanding how this guy was going to live. And then using ROV in one of the Mediterranean coral forests, this one is of the bamboo coral, we realized that this guy lives upside down. And so for this reason, it has a heavy head and a really thick tail, is not able to swim a lot, and his life is strictly connected with the presence of corals, because it used the corals to camouflage and so to live in this way. This is just an example of really weird biodiversity we're seeing down there, and I feel really lucky to do it. Another example comes from nudibranchs. Well, nudibranchs, for those who don't know them, are sea slugs. So are marine mollusks that, differently from every other mollusks, they like a lot to show up. They are pretty much extrovert, and that's because they are poisonous. So they like to be noted in order not to be eaten. And nudibranchs like this that you see here, they are coastal species. They live they can be observed by scuba diving, basically. But in the deep sea, we find something very similar. I was studying a coral forest made by another species, which is Callogorgia. This is a huge deep sea sea fan in the Mediterranean and in the Atlantic Ocean. Well, this species, we saw some sea slugs on these corals. You need to know that sea slugs most of the time are species specific, so every species lives only on a species of corals. And we saw this one, which was a new species, and I'm particularly proud of it because as a zoologist, so a person who studies animals, the greatest goal you can achieve is to describe at least a new species. And this was the first new species I described, a Tritone, so a new sea slug who was basically living on the corals I was studying. So was living on them, eating them, and mostly laying eggs, reproducing on them, so having a lot of fun on the corals. They spend mostly all their life on the corals. And this is another example of how colorful and weird creatures can live and thrive down there, even far from our eyes, but still pretty much important from an ecosystem point of view, because the presence of these sea slugs somehow regulate the life of the corals, and the corals are the main habitat formers down there. The coral forests like this one are really true biodiversity oasis in the vastness of the deep sea. They are they create this habitat which is three-dimensional, and so basically they attract a lot of organisms, a lot of fish, of crustaceans, and many other creatures that go there to find food, to find shelter, to lay their eggs, to find a place feasible for their reproduction, or as a true gasoline station in the huge migration of migratory species. So these are really important, and they are all connected. In the map I showed you before, all the coral sites in the Mediterranean Sea are somehow connected by currents. And so we are identifying those strategic places to protect in order to guarantee a sort of ecological corridor for these species. And the last example I will show you is about sharks. Also, sharks are pretty much important down there, and we are finding shark eggs. Some of the sharks, the small ones, are like this blackmouth shark or the cat sharks. They lay eggs. They are oviparous, and they need corals to lay their eggs because they pretty much attach their eggs on the corals, as you can see in the image there. And on the right, you can see the small embryo of a shark just moving in a egg that we filmed attached to a coral. So also these top predators, they need corals for their survival. And when we see this is great, because when you see a top predator, which is the most fragile species from an ecological point of view, the most fragile category, when you see a top predator reproducting, that means that the place you are exploring is still somehow healthy, is still somehow working from an ecological point of view, and this is great. This is a guarantee of huge biodiversity. In fact, studying these places, we always see a number that encompass many thousands of different species just living there. This specific picture comes from the Balearic Sea. So place is really, really important and really full of biodiversity that are just outside our window, and we don't even imagine sometimes that during the huge blue surface of the sea, even in places that are touristic, so that are known from a touristic point of view, I'm not showing you images from remote places like, I don't know, Antarctica or whatever. This is the Mediterranean Sea, one of the most exploited places, one of the most exploited basins. But still, in the deep, we've got many unseen cool stuff. And talking about exploration, I'm particularly proud of a recent exploration we did in an archipelago, which is called Trimity Islands in the Central Adriatic Sea. Here we went to explore because we have a marine protected area since 30 years almost, but the seabed of the place was still not explored. It's a weird phenomenon of having a park that maybe 30 years ago was mainly created for human activities or on a paper, but still not based on deep sea explorations. Well, this was pretty much common until a few decades ago, because it was still not possible to have access to deep sea exploration tools. And so we decided to explore this place to see, okay, let's look what are we really protecting in this archipelago. And so we went exploring it with ROV. I suppose there could be some coral places, because this is a really cool place for scuba diving, also at shallow water depth. So that means that somewhere much deeper, there should be an habitat, a really good one, like a coral forest, that support this huge biodiversity. And we went there and we found it. We went there searching for some corals, and we end up finding one of the largest black coral forests known thus far in the Mediterranean Sea. A huge place full of these arborescent corals that look like trees, up to 1.5 meters in height, and really full of life. And this place, we didn't really expect to do. This is the magic of exploration, right? We didn't really expect to find a place which is so good and so healthy and so beautiful and so rich in the area. And so for this reason, the Italian production of National Geographic decided to do a film with me, documenting the exploration of this place and all these things. The film was released during the first lockdown, so they, and I'm really grateful for them, they decided to release it for free on internet, on the National Geographic Italy website, in order to make it accessible to everyone during the weird period of the first lockdown, where we were not ready at all for what we were living. And as you can see, as you can tell from this picture, black corals are white underwater. And this is somehow confusing, but they are white when they are living. It's their skeletal that is black, and so it gives the name to the black corals. On the top, you can see the polyps of the black corals. So every single polyp, every single of these tiny flowers is the living animal. And the whole coral is a colony. So a huge group of these tiny polyps, they have a mouth like this, and in this case, 6 tentacles, while their skeletal is black. And this, if we cut it, we can see some growing rings, like the ones you can see, for example, for the trees, but differently from the trees. These are not particularly useful to understand how old are they, because they can be really old. This particular piece I'm showing you, we used radiocarbon dating to understand how old was it, and we realized it is somehow 900 years old, and it was alive. So animals that can easily reach more than 1,000 years, and that can easily be killed by fishermen. This coral, of course, was not sampled by us, but was accidentally collected by a fisherman that gave it to me. And you suddenly realize a beast, an animal that was there since 1,000 years, that in 1 second it's just killed and collected by accident through deep sea fishery. So we are starting to realize how these important places are fragile. Corals that lives on our planet in the seabed, even before dinosaurs, they were doing more or less fine, even during the catastrophic event that killed the dinosaurs. And now these really resilient organisms are just dying because of our action. And this makes me think a lot about what we can do to protect these places. In fact, these places are affected, first of all, by fishery. When we do deep sea exploration, it's pretty much common to find, for example, lost fishing gears. And that happened also in the Tritone marine protected area. So proving some sort of illegal fishing in the area, probably. Or maybe some fishing activities very old, even before the creation of the marine protected area. Because the nets or the long lines, they live pretty much forever. They are made to be durable, and in the deep sea, they are not going to be degraded because the water is cold and the pressure is pretty much high. So we are accumulating a lot of derelict fishing gears on the seabed, which are continuing in their destruction action, not only for the corals or other habitat formers, but also for fish and for crustaceans. As you can see here, this is a lost fishing net, which is just doing its job, which is fishing, even if no one is collecting the resources. And these resources will act as bait for new resources in a continuous circle, like a black hole for killing marine life in a pointless way, if you think, because this net is just fishing down there for no reason. And this is one of the consequences of some practice of fishing that we're trying to contrast now in many places, and Tremiti Islands is one of them. I'm particularly grateful to the marine park managers, because after the finding of the black corals, now we are doing specific protection measures for this coral forest, which is on the borders of the MPA, on the marine protected area. So we are enlarging the marine protected areas, and we are creating, we are intensifying the controls in order not to have a fishing practice on the area, because these places, this millennial coral forest, can easily die for one or few fishing events. And of course, it's not worth it. But together with fishery, we've got, for example, pollution. Doing deep sea explorations in other areas, it's pretty much common to observe marine litter pretty much everywhere. We see sometimes in documentaries, we see the plastic islands, the great garbage plastic islands somewhere in the ocean, but we need to remember that most of the garbage goes down in the deep sea and still remain there. So if the plastic garbage are horrible and make us feel very bad, just think that in the deep sea it's even more, and we should feel even more guilty. Really, we need to stop this. We need to stop the use of single-use plastic. As you can see on the top left, I was exploring deep sea coral bank south of Sardinia, and what we saw is this. On this plastic bag, it's written in Italian, biodegradable bag. And this bag is clearly not biodegrading, and is choking some deep sea corals that easily have 400 or 500 years. So even biodegradable devices, they can biodegrade on land, but once they reach the seabed, they are not going to be biodegraded anymore. And so they are pretty much similar to the hard plastic. We find football, of course we are football fans in Italy, so we have football also on the deep sea, but every kind of garbage. And this is something, it's not necessarily regulated only by politicians, but it's something that concerns to us as well. Every one of us can do the difference. And the third huge plug of deep sea corals and deep sea ecosystems in general is global warming. And to show you global warming, I'm going to show you how beautiful are some of the coral forests we have in the Mediterranean Sea. This, for example, is the red gorgonian. It's another coral which is not really deep. You can scuba dive. It can live up to 1,000-meter depth, but we start finding this species from 30-meter depth. So we can scuba dive, and I'll try to bring Paul to one of these coral forests as well. Well, these forests are amazing. They are the most important attraction for scuba divers. It's great to fly underwater in this red and yellow forest, full of life, full of fish. They are one of the beating heart of the seabed in the Mediterranean Sea. And what's happening now? This is a healthy sea fan. What we are observing now is they start dying. We are observing mass mortality events all over the Mediterranean Sea, mostly due to global warming. And so this depends on our action. There's no marine protected area that can protect these corals against global warming, and so against climate changes. So for this reason, we need, of course, strong political actions, but we need also to do our part, each one of us. By protecting the ocean, we can start protecting the biodiversity in our own houses, in our own places. And so I particularly like this movie, The Neverending Story, where at a certain point the horse of Atreyu just die in the swamp of sadness when you die, if you lose hopes. So we know that we need to be optimistic, which is really difficult when you study corals. But we need to stay optimistic and to try to find solution. There is plenty of actions that we can do to do our part every day. Every small action matters. And so for this reason, I invite everyone to just be informed. Online, we can find really everything we need. And so I really invite once more everyone to do our action in order to try to reduce as much as possible our footprint. And I say thank you by giving you this further picture of a black coral in the Adriatic Sea, which was one of my great love during the last 3 years. And I thank you for your attention.
Wow, Giovanni, you've really brought that to life. I mean, you're speaking to a man here in Geneva, Switzerland, which is, you know, he's a long way from the sea, but I really felt that. I can't wait to dive with you in July. This is going to be just fantastic. You know what you've done there, Giovanni, is you've reminded us all that we must have hope. And you've also, you know, told the planet and reminded us all again that if we understand the beauty of various parts of our planet, then if we learn to love it, and if we love it, we can protect it. Because, as you well said, a lot of people see the Mediterranean as a place to go on holiday or go sailing or fishing. They take it for granted. But thanks to you, we can begin to understand it properly. And if we understand it, we can love it and we can help protect it. I mean, that was a fantastic presentation, Giovanni. Couldn't be better.
Thank you very much.
I know we're out of time. I've got 2 very quick questions for you. One, can anyone dive with you? I would love to explore these forests with you.
Of course. I mean, I would like to. I never say no to scuba dives. So.
And the second one, can we artificially introduce other variety of corals that are adapted to climate change, which you've seen? Yeah, this coral replantation.
Yeah. But that's a good point, because in order not to lose hopes, we are also studying other corals. For example, last year I was with other colleagues in the Red Sea, exploring the deep sea in the Red Sea. Well, the Red Sea is pretty much warm, and so it was stopped not to hosting deep sea corals, but we found deep sea corals also there that are somehow used to warm waters. So there is hope, but we need to do our part in our everyday life, and then nature will do the rest.
Amazing stuff, Giovanni. Wow, I'm ready. I was ready for our July trip ages ago, but now I'm ready.
Yeah,
Giovanni,
can't wait for it.
thank you so much, buddy. Keep up the great work. We're with you.
Thanks you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.